Hi guys, Simon here. I'm here to give you your very first lesson, just like this so you can see it, on drum maintenance. On our very first lesson we talk about naming parts of the snare drum and their function on the snare drum. So understanding what each part is, how it works, and understanding that will give us a much better understanding of how sound is produced from the drum, and when we're ready to, on how to tune the drums. And I've got an Andante here and a Premier here, and I'm using those because those are the two drums that we have at the school at Presto Lodge. So let's get started with the very top of the drum. So at the very top we've got a top skin, and the purpose of the top skin is for the drummer to hit. So you're going to hit this or that, and you're going to hit it right in the middle, and that is what starts off the production of sound. So that is called the top skin. And you'll see that this one's white, this one's yellow. Doesn't mean that they're any different or bad or worse. It's just different types of top skin that you can get. So the yellow one for me, both of these are Andante top heads. Yellow one, you get huge amounts of pitch and snare, but you don't get the depth of sound. The white one for me, not as bright pitch, but you get much more depth, but the difference in pitch is very minor. So for me, I really like the white heads on these drums. So that was our top rim, our top skin. Underneath the top skin, and you'll see when I lift the snare up, you've got a top snare. Okay, that runs directly underneath the top skin. Okay, and on the Andante it's there as well. And you won't see it, okay, because the top skin's covering it, but it is there, and that can be adjusted by lifting it up and bringing it down, making it tight or making it loose by using these here, which we'll talk about shortly. And the Andante, the key goes into there to adjust them. So top rim, underneath was the top snare, top skin, sorry, and then here along there we've got a top rim for the drum. So the purpose of the top rim is for the drum skin to sit underneath. So the drum skin will sit there. Your top rim is what pulls the drum skin down. So when you're wanting the drum skin to be tighter, to get a brighter pitch, you would tighten up the top rim through the tension bolts, and then that makes the drum tighter. Okay, so without a top rim, the drum skin would just float. Okay, so it would be completely pointless, as you will see with the majority of these drum parts. So that's your top rim. And then you've got your tension bolts that I mentioned here. So the tension bolts, and you see them on the Andante drum there, the tension bolts attach through the top rim and apply tension to the drum. So again, when I want the drum to be brighter, or if it's a new skin, I would need to loosen these off to take the skin off, or these, and then put the new skin on, tighten them back up again. They're the tension bolts, and they go through the top rim. And you'll see, if you look closely at the tension bolts there, are going into the suspension ring. So this is the suspension ring here, and you've got the same on the Andante. So the suspension ring for me is what completes the top half of the tension of the drum. So you've got your top skin. Okay, when you hit it, that's what gives you the sound. Underneath the skin was the snare, which we'll show you when we lift the drum up. And then you had your top rim, which has the tension bolts, which when you apply tension goes into the suspension ring. And the suspension ring's there to sustain the tension from the top, and for me also the bottom. You can see the suspension ring there. And the reason it sustains the tension from top to bottom, and here we have tension rods. On Premier drums there are more tension rods than there are on the Andante drums. Okay, it's not a bad thing that there's more or less, okay, it's just a design. Okay, and the tension rods are attached to the suspension ring. Okay, so all your tension from the top rim into the suspension ring is sustained by the suspension ring, and then held together with the tension rods, which sustains the tension from the top and the bottom. So if you didn't have the tension rods, if they weren't there, you'd be applying tension to the top of the drum, but you could just lift this off. You could lift the top rim off. There's nothing holding it in place or sustaining the tension. So moving on now, a fancy blue and black fade, and on this Andante it's just blue. That is your drum shell. It is wooden, okay, just made of wood, and then it's got a paint finish with varnish, okay, because you can get it painted to whatever finish you would like, depending on what company you go for. And the purpose of the shell is to sustain or maintain the vibrations of the drum. So when you hit the drum, like that, the drum skin's vibrating, which causes the snare to vibrate. And then the vibrations are going through the drum shell. Alright, so the drum shell's almost acting like a speaker. It's getting all these vibrations, bubbling them up and bursting them out again through the top and also through the bottom of the drum. And it's the exact same with the Andante. Yeah? And then on the Premier here, on this Andante, it doesn't have one, but newer models of the Andante drum do have what's called an air hole or a sound hole. Okay, so that little hole there is designed to allow air to go inside the drum shell. Okay, so with a bit more air, if you think of it like an accordion, so when you compress it, you get so much sound coming out of the accordion when you squeeze the air, and then you're bringing more in and you're squeezing it and getting even more sound. That's not going to suck air in, alright, it's not going to go and suck it in like an accordion, but that's the way that they get air inside the drum, is through that little air hole. Okay? And as I said before, the Andante does not have an air hole. And what we'll do now is we'll flip the drums over. And we'll talk about the bottom of the drum. So I spoke about the top snare being inside the drum. What I'll do now is I'm going to lift the drum up to you and see inside. Don't look at the bottom snare. If I angle it there, you'll see it better. See that top snare in there? It's pushing against the top of the drum head. That's what I was talking about earlier. You can see it just in there. And then we'll do the same with the Andante. See the top snare in there? Pushed against the top drum skin. Like that. And before I move on to the bottoms of the drum, you've got a harness bracket here. So this would be used for the Jim Kilpatrick harnesses for the drums to be carried. A lot of drums don't have that the harness bracket. They'll come with, that's the school bell, mental. It will come with a carrying hook. Okay, so if you're wanting to use just a drum sling, which is a leather sling or a material sling, for a wee hook, you would hook it onto that and you would carry the drum with the leather strap. A lot of bands still do that. Tenor drummers tend to use just hooks. You do sometimes see tenor drummers use harnesses, but again, it's not very often you would see that. And then I'll bring the drum closer so you can see this. On the side, you've got a top snare tension and top snare height adjusters. Okay, so this one here says height on and off, and this one says tension on and off. So when I get a drum key, and I'll not do it just now, but if I get a drum key and twist this up the way, it's going to bring the snare up. And when I twist it away from me, it's going to bring the snare down. So depending how close you want the snare to the drum skin, you would use this. And then on the other side you had the tension adjuster, which was just there. So if you're wanting the snare to be tighter, you would tighten it by twisting it away from you to tighten it up. Righty tighty, lefty loosey. And that'll make the snare much tighter. and then twisting it towards you, lefty loosey, will make the snare much looser. So depending on how much snare you want to hear when you're playing the drum, you would have it really high, really low, really tight, really loose. And on the Andante, it doesn't have the bolts, but you'll see there, that's where you would put an Allen key inside this hole here, and that would adjust the height. And the other side, the Allen key goes just there, and that applies tension to the snare. So it's the exact same principles as it is with the Premier. Height, tension, height, tension. It's just using a different drum key to be able to do each of those things. So let's flip to the drums upside down. Right, let's have a look at the bottoms of these drums. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this here. This is called an intermediate ring on the snare drum. The Andante has something similar, but it's not called an intermediate ring. That's basically where, for the Andante, the bottom tension bolts attached to it, so it's not really an intermediate ring. The purpose of the intermediate ring is to give a bit more stability to the tension bolts, because that's where the tension bolts are coming through, as you'll be able to see here. And it also allows you to attach, it's almost like a bolt restraint or bolt attachment to the bottom. So you'll see when you tighten up these bottom tension bolts, they're going into this little attachment here. Okay, and again, the tension's going into these tension rods and it's meeting up with the top. So everything is meeting in the middle through these tension bolts. So let's talk about this bad boy here. So you'll see a little handle. That's basically a carry handle or a bottom snare protector, because when you see, if I put the drum down like this, there's a wee space there. Okay, that's what these bars are doing, is effectively protecting the bottom drum skin, because the bottom drum skin is far more sensitive than the top drum skin, because it's a lot thinner. Okay, so now we've got the bottom snare block. And the bottom snare block here is where you've got these two bolts here are twisty knobs, and then you've got this one here, and it's the exact same on the other side, the exact same. So the first one here, okay, these are the bottom snare height adjusters. So you won't really see clearly in the video, but if I loosen this, it's going to lift, and you'll hear it, it will lift this corner of the snare. In fact, you can see it lifting up, and if I tighten it, you'll see that corner going back down. Okay, so it adjusts that corner of the snare. This one does the exact same, but it does it to this corner of the snare. So it's adjusting this corner. So if I tighten this one up and loosen this one up, you'll see that the height is being adjusted for that corner. And as I tighten it up, you hear how it's getting closer to the snare. Okay, so when you're tuning the bottom snare, you need to adjust all four corners, and then you would adjust the tension of the snare, which is what these two bolts are for. So bottom snare height adjusters, bottom snare tension adjusters, and you'll see it just there. It's a little bolt on the end of the drum. And then we'll talk about the same with the Andante. You've got these two bits here, exact same as that. It's a carry handle, but it's there to protect the bottom skin, or the bottom snare you would maybe say. And then on this side, this little bolt here does the same as what these two do. So that's a bottom snare tension adjuster. You loosen this, it will loosen the snare. You tighten that, it will make the bottom snare tighter. And with the Andante, instead of having the four bolts on each side, like your height adjusters, you've got to do it by a drum key. So your drum key would slot through here, and you'll see just there the bottom snare is held on with the bolts there. So I would take a drum key and loosen that corner if I wanted to lift that side of the snare, and I would loosen that one if I wanted to lift that side of the snare. It's just going to lift that bottom snare up. And then you've got the bottom snare itself, which you'll see runs along the bottom head. So the exact opposite of the top head. On the top head, the snare is underneath, i.e. inside the drum. On the bottom head, the snare is on top, so it's outside of the drum. And every time you hit the drum, and you're not meant to hit the bottom skin, you'll hear that snare vibrate. You'll hear that one vibrate as well. This one sounds a lot brighter because that is a snare, it's bottom skin that's been on a lot longer and a lot tighter. These bottom skins on this drum are fairly new, so they would need tightened up quite a lot to get to the same pitch as that one. Okay? So your bottom skin, bottom snare, and then exact same as the top of the drum, you've got your bottom rim, okay, which has the tension bolts which go through and attach to, instead of the suspension ring, these attach to the tension bolts, the tension rods themselves. And exact same with the Andante, bottom rim, tension bolts, but they attach to this intermediate ring here, or almost like the bottom, it's like a bottom suspension ring, you would say. So all of these parts of the drum are doing the exact same thing, it's just slightly different designs to the drums, which make them very, very unique. But you're still achieving, or trying to achieve, the exact same thing with each one. So, quick recap. We'll do one drum at a time. So top skin, underneath the top skin is the top snare. Top rim with your tension bolts, which when tension is applied to the drum, goes into the suspension ring, which will make the drum sound a lot brighter and sharper. Then you've got your tension bolts, which sustains the tension from the top and the bottom. You've got your drum shell, which controls all the vibrations. Your air hole, there it is there. Your top snare height adjuster, top snare tension adjusters, and then onto the bottom of the drum, we had our bottom skin, bottom snare, bottom rim, tension bolts, bottom snare height adjusters, bottom snare tension adjusters, and just to prove a point, it's the exact same. Bottom snare height adjusters, bottom snare tension adjusters, and then your bottom snare protector or carry handle. With the Andante, top rim, or top skin, sorry, underneath the top skin was the top snare, top rim, and then you had your tension bolts which attached to the suspension ring, and then we had our tension rods, drum shell to sustain all the vibrations and the sound. Remember we were talking about the amplifier. Andante doesn't have an air hole or a sound hole, and then you've got your height adjuster in here, tension adjuster in here for the top snares, and then flipping it up, bottom skin, bottom snare, bottom rim, and tension bolts, and then we would say that's your bottom suspension ring or intermediate ring. And then we had the handlebars here, shift this out the road, which was your bottom snare protector, and then this bowl here was your bottom snare tension adjuster, and then the four corners, that one there, and then that one there is your bottom snare height adjusters. And this bit here is a snare retaining block even. You'll notice that it looked different to the snare height adjuster. Okay, this is basically the same as this big mechanism. It's just there to hold the snare in place. And that are all the parts of the drum named and explained.